The battle for talent is ongoing in construction, and the need to recruit both labor and office talent is ongoing. I think the economy is strong at the moment in construction. I think that the downturn that everyone was expecting at a certain point never really hit. You can source talent for construction in places that you haven't looked yet.
Welcome back to Talent Hunters, where we explore insights and trends shaping the global recruiting and staffing industry. Want to build talented teams that drive your company toward big goals and big growth? Then this podcast is for you. And now, let's join the conversation with today's episode of Talent Hunters, brought to you by HireQuest. Connect with us at hirequest.com.
Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vince Holt, and I'm the host of Talent Hunters. We have an exciting guest today, and Eric Anderton. Eric is a trusted leadership advisor and executive mentor in helping construction firms increase profits by clarifying their business purpose, building strategic plans, and developing their best people. Eric is well known by the Construction Genius title. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, looking forward to this. I have to tell you, in the recruiting world, we have lots of peaks and valleys and speed bumps and so forth. And what I've noticed over the years, you guys kind of mirror the same thing. There's lots of peaks and valleys in the construction world. I mean, I've seen construction booming at times, and then the bottom falls out of it for whatever be the political, financial, whatever the reasons are. Right now, I'm feeling another so far speed bump out there. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and really what got you to where you are in your career journey today.
I started working with construction companies in 2004. I was selling a leadership development program, and my first client was a contractor, and they're still my client today. And so when I launched my own business in 2013, focusing on executive coaching and strategic planning, I niched pretty quickly to the construction industry, and from that, the brand Construction Genius came forth. And many people ask me, oh, Eric, does that make you the genius? And I tell them that the name of my company comes from the Edison quote that genius is 99% perspiration and 1% inspiration. And so I view myself as the 1% inspiration for my clients who put in the 99% perspiration.
I love that. I love that. It's interesting to hear your description. What do you feel is the nucleus of your inspiration to the construction?
I think the word simplicity is what comes to mind. My talent and my expertise is in taking complex situations, particularly as they relate to the relationships between people, and simplifying what is causing the difficulties in those relationships, and then guiding people through questions, through inquiry, to the point where they understand what they need to do in order to improve those relationships.
Dumbing it down to my level. I love that.
I wouldn't say dumbing it down, because I don't think it's dumbing it down. I think that someone said something about how simplicity is the ultimate elegance or something like that, or the ultimate sophistication. I think it's really being able to get through the different emotional and intellectual challenges that we have in our relationships and even within ourselves, and identifying with as much clarity as possible the things that we actually need to do to improve those relationships, to improve those situations.
So well put. The simplicity of we complicate things naturally, whether we're successful or we're having hiccups or whatever. We complicate things, and what you're saying is what we should be doing is bringing it right back to the very basics that got us to where we were to begin with.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things for people, the most helpful thing, is for us to understand our realm of responsibility, the area of things that we are responsible for, and then get that clarity on what we need to do to take responsibility for the outcomes within that realm of responsibility. And if we can help each other to do that, that's how we make progress, is taking responsibility right now, regardless of what's happened in the past, not necessarily fearing what may happen in the future, but right now, today, in this situation, what is the choice that I can make to progress in the area that I'm faced with?
I love that. Could you give our audience an example that really stands out of you really getting somebody to understand exactly what you've done?
Yeah, so I was just chatting with one of my clients just a moment ago, actually, on a previous call. And this person is an executive in a construction company leading other high performers. And they're struggling with some issues around revenue recognition and revenue capture. And going through the conversation, there were some very simple things that some of the folks who were reporting to this person were missing. And the reason that they were being missed is because my client wasn't consistently following up with them and holding them accountable. Because the way that my client was functioning was simply by thinking that by asking them to do something, it was going to get done, when in fact what was required was more direct and consistent accountability. And so through a very simple conversation where I was asking a few open-ended questions, my client came to the point where they realized that, hey, I just need to be more direct and more consistent in my follow-up.
Is there psychology training in your background?
No. I think, yeah, there's no psychology training, but what there is an interest in other people. I find other people more interesting than myself. And so I think what that leads me to be able to do is to ask them questions that help them to explore the things that they are doing, the reasons they are doing those things, and help to bring them to the point of understanding what they need to do differently if they're going to get a different result.
Boy, how profound. Earlier, I had mentioned something about a hiccup that is starting to affect construction. It's politically based, but I don't want to get into politics. I was talking to somebody in the construction world, and they were telling me that there are some major construction companies running into a lot of problems right now with people due to the political changes that have happened over the last 30 days. These recruiting firms are getting bombarded because they're needing more people now. How are you, first of all, have you run into any of that in the last few weeks?
I think generally industry-wide in construction, the lack of both qualified labor and also talented and skilled project management personnel is endemic. It's across the whole industry. I don't think it's ever going away. And so regardless of, now the exception would be is if we went into the tank again, let's say as in 2008, then a lot of talent would be freed up because a lot of companies would be struggling. But right now, despite the ups and downs in different parts of the economy, overall, the battle for talent is ongoing in construction, and the need to recruit both labor and office talent is ongoing, and I don't think it's going anywhere. That's just going to be the reality of the industry.
Have you felt any of the overall feedback coming that there's a loss of workers due to I-9 verifications?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I see where you're coming from. So that's going to happen, right? That's definitely going to happen. I know one company that, even a couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago, probably about 5 years ago, they got hit with an audit basically, and it wiped out their workforce. So there's going to be that happening. I think it's probably gonna vary from state to state based on the makeup of the workforce. With that having been said, I think that's just going to, again, increase the need for the development of talent locally. I think it'll shift the need for people who have not perhaps considered the trades to consider the trades. And I think it's also incumbent upon the industry itself to do a much better job at the high school level, emphasizing the need for vocational training, which has been dispensed with in many ways in the high schools over the last 20 or 30 years. I think that's going to continue to make a comeback, particularly if the I-9 situation does take out a lot of the labor workforce.
There's over the years, and I'm going to say at least over the last decade or two, parents, high schools, whatever influencers were out there pushing people into electronics, pushing people into the high-tech world. I couldn't agree with you more. A year and a half ago, I moved across state. I live in the state of Washington, and I moved from the western part of the state to the eastern part of the state. Western part, high tech galore, as you probably well know. It's ironic. I moved into a house a year and a half ago, and I've never seen so much residential construction in my life. And they're dragging people. They're begging people for help. And they're putting up temporary living houses, apartment buildings, houses. It's just incredible. Now, does your work take you across the country, or does your work just keep you in your location?
No, I have clients all over the country, yeah.
Okay. So what do you see is it the entire construction industry that's in a boom right now, or is it just commercial, or is it mostly residential? What's your feel of what's happening out there?
I think the economy is strong at the moment in construction. I think that the downturn that everyone was expecting at a certain point never really hit. And all of my clients are busy at the moment. I have no clients that are, chasing work. And I think that goes across the board. Now, most of my clients are commercial contractors. I don't really work with residential contractors. So I think the residential contracting boom varies from state to state based on regulations and based on particular needs. Obviously here in California where I am, it's not easy to build. And maybe at some point the political structure and the regulations will change so it becomes easier again. But in other states, it's much easier to build. And so, there's a lot more activity on the residential side.
Well, there's going to be huge activity on the residential side in Southern California due to the fire.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
So there's going to be a lot of people busy there.
Yes.
So in your experience with coaching and trying to counsel and work with leadership of construction companies, what do you feel is their greatest overall challenge today that you enjoy getting involved in?
I think the biggest one is communication, and specifically having difficult conversations with people and holding people accountable.
You keep bouncing back to accountability, and in my world, I'm oh boy, I'm a preacher of accountability. Break that down in the construction vernacular. That what are you talking about accountability?
Yeah, well, I think before you get to accountability, there's a step that comes before that, and that's delegation. And so to be effective when it comes to delegation, three things must be in place. First, you must be clear about the task that you are delegating. And that's one of the challenges with high performers, is because many of the tasks that they do instinctively, they do based on their experience. And therefore, when they do delegate, they're often unclear about the task itself because they miss out on many of the steps that they do unconsciously. And so if I'm going to delegate effectively, I must first be very clear on what it is that I'm delegating. And one of the best ways to do that is just to write out step by step what it is that I want someone to do. Then once I'm clear, I have to then ask the person I'm delegating to, are they capable of doing this task? It would be unwise and unfair to delegate a task to someone who doesn't have the training or the capability to do the task, the competency. And so I must be very diligent and conscientious in teaching my people how to do the tasks that I'm delegating to them. And then the third question I must ask is, do they have the capacity? In other words, the bandwidth. Because many times we delegate to people and they say, yes, I'll take on the task, But because we've already delegated to them a bunch of other stuff, they don't have the capacity to do the task well. And the return that I get from the delegation is not optimal. So assuming that I've delegated correctly with the clarity, the capability, and the capacity, then I've earned the right to hold someone accountable. And accountability is tremendously simple, but it's not easy because I have to get over the discomfort that I might have of holding someone accountable because of potential conflict. The other person has to get over the discomfort they may have of being held accountable. And so an accountable conversation can be tremendously simple. I just go to the person and I say, did you do it? Yeah. If not, why not? How can I help? Very straightforward. Try and remove the emotion from it. Try and keep people accountable on a consistent basis, because that keeps from the, it avoids the buildup of issues that occurs if we allow time to pass. And just be tremendously consistent in having those simple, straightforward, direct conversations. And the more direct you can be, the more progress you can make. Because if you're not direct, if you're indirect, if you're suggestive, if you're not very straightforward with people, it can leave ambiguity, gray areas. And as a result of that, there can be a lack of productivity and a lack of effectiveness.
And the one thing that I'm sure that you add to that is when you're following up in the accountability, have it on a consistent schedule that both parties know about.
Yes.
So that it's not a spontaneous, oh gosh.
Yeah. And another thing, it's funny because I was just talking to one of my clients about this. If you're on a particular schedule of accountability, and whatever you're holding them accountable for is not happening, then maybe you need to change your accountability discussion frequency. So for instance, if holding someone accountable once a week doesn't work, then hold them accountable every single day and let them know and say, listen, this is not working. We're not getting the results that we want. So I want you to know that I'm going to be following up with you every single day. And, perhaps an extreme analogy is this: when someone's quitting drugs or alcohol or something like that, then they ask you, hey, can you check in with me every day? That's completely necessary. Now, as they get off the drugs and the alcohol, maybe it's a weekly check-in or a monthly check-in over time. But initially, hey, I'm going to check in with you every single day, and I'm going to do it for your benefit and for my benefit, because if you don't execute these tasks, then we're not going to get the results that we're looking for.
Clearly, you're not passionate about this subject. I love that. What patterns have you noticed separate the highly successful firms from those that struggle?
That's a great question. I would say there's three things. Number one, they understand the right projects to build with the right clients in the right locations. Okay? So right client, right project, right location. Number two, they have processes in place that are clear and that work. And they repeat those processes on a consistent basis, both in bidding work, in planning work, in building work, and then in collecting the money. They have processes in place. And then thirdly, they have the people in place who are executing those processes in an effective manner. And specifically, they have the right people who are a cultural fit for the organization in the right positions. That is, they have the technical ability to execute in those positions. So those three things: project, process, and people, those work together. And if I'm nailing that on a consistent basis, that's where the success comes from.
Eric, I've got to ask, what makes what you do and what you just passionately laid out, what makes it so different than any other industry out there away from construction?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, your specialty, obviously, is in the construction world. But everything you just laid out, to me, can cross over to every industry out there, not just construction. It could be the electronics industry. It can be, manufacturing, whatever it is. So do you go out and do you speak at gatherings of construction company owners? how do you get their attention right off the bat?
Well, if I just say what I just said to you now to them, then they're like, "Yep, Eric gets it."
And that's what I was asking. And you hit it right between the eyes, because everything you just said, I mean, I worked as a recruiter in the electronics industry, the footwear industry, the hospitality industry, and everything you just said is a requirement in every one of those industries.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about bridging outside of construction?
It's funny you say that, because I have intentionally chosen construction as the area that I focus on, because I don't have a construction background in any way. So I'm not a technical expert when it comes to construction, but I've chosen construction simply because I love contractors. I'm a pretty straightforward, simple guy. Most people in construction are real straightforward and simple. They love to build. I love to build. Maybe not physical objects, but conceptually. And so I know that what I do applies in other areas, but from a marketing perspective, from a time perspective, from taking my own advice in terms of having a niche, which I described with right project, right client, right location, I've chosen the niche of construction, and it's served me very well.
So before you did all this,
Yes.
before you got into what did you do professionally?
Well, I started out of college selling copy machines. So I've been in sales most of my life, and like I said, in 2004, I pivoted from copiers into selling a leadership development program. The gentleman I was working with then during that time was pretty instrumental in helping me develop my skills in terms of facilitating meetings and being able to sell conceptual things such as training and development. And, over time, I like I said, I started working with contractors. I developed relationships with them. And when I launched my own business, over time, I understood that, construction was the niche that I wanted to go after. And that's how I got into it.
What I love is the fact that you're known as the construction genius, but you don't hit people with answers. You hit people with questions.
Yeah.
And you're doing something that I admire so much, and that is you ask enough questions, direct questions, that the person you're talking to or the persons you're talking with really come up with their own answers, because you're asking the questions that get them to figure out their scenarios and how simply to bring solution to their problem. Did I hit that?
Yeah. I just want to say that it's not my job to give people advice, because I really believe that people understand that they know what they need to do, either intellectually or based on their intuition. They just need help articulating it and clarifying it, and then they just need someone to hold them accountable for the actions that they come up with. They know the answers already. They just need help getting to clarity.
So we'll clear back to sales. And sales is not providing the answers so much as sales is asking the questions. I love that. So where do you see the construction business? Now, you focus primarily on the commercial side. Where do you see the commercial construction world? What do you see it evolving to in the next 5 to 10 years?
There's a tremendous amount of activity around construction in terms of technology. And a lot of that technology is trying to solve the problem of the lack of labor that we've talked about. And I think that that's going to continue to be something that is pushed. I think it's tremendously difficult to completely remove people from the construction process. And I think because construction is so unique in that it's not manufacturing, right? You can't just put a roof over, a project and build it in a manufactured, controlled environment. Every project is unique. It brings unique partners together. I think that in the next 5 to 10 years, progress is going to be continued to be made in the area of automation of the construction process, whether it's through offsite construction, whether it's through the use of robotics on site. More progress is going to be made, but ultimately, there's going to be a tremendous human element involved in construction, regardless of any of the technology advancements that happen.
So dig a little deeper into that, because in one respect, you're saying that technology is going to evolve. Technology evolves. People take the premise that that's to replace people. But you're saying the human element is always going to, are we still going to have the same demand in your vision for the people that we have a shortage of today?
Yeah, I think that remains to be seen. I think that people are doing whatever they can to, for lack of a better phrase, remove people from the construction process as much as possible. I'm skeptical as to how far that can go, again, because of the unique nature of construction. Because, the project that you built last year and, with those project partners is not the same as the project you're going to build next year with different project partners in a different physical location. And so the hype is around getting to the point where, you have perhaps one or two operators on site and they're, using the various machines and the various processes that have been created through technology, and you just don't need as much labor as you used to need. And I think it'll go that way over time, but I still think that ultimately construction is going to be labor intensive. And so it's desperately needed that we, in addition to focus on progressing the technology, we stay laser focused on developing the people. And that goes back to what I said earlier about cultivating relationships with high schools and re-emphasizing, reintroducing the value, the nobility, the dignity, the opportunity that comes with working in the trades.
Wow. So I come from the recruiting world. Obviously, we bring talent to different industries. What's a message that you could say to recruiters that would help your construction world?
I think one thing that I would say to recruiters is that you can source talent for construction in places that you haven't looked yet. And I don't know how applicable this would be, but if I was starting a recruiting business, one of the things that I would do is seek to develop relationships with local universities and high schools, and specifically with people who are involved in the sports programs there, who may not necessarily think of construction as their first choice, but have the kind of mentality of being team-oriented, being achievement-oriented, that works really well with construction. And I would encourage recruiters to use those relationships as potential sources for talent, both in the field and in the office.
Wow. That's profound. Appreciate that. Really do. I don't work in the construction world, but I know of a lot of people within the organization that I've been affiliated with that do specialize in the construction world, whether it's residential, whether it's commercial. Your advice to recruiters can cross over. There's no guideline. It doesn't have to be one or the other. What do you feel is going to be, over the next 2 to 3 years, the biggest hurdle that your industry is going to have to get their arms around immediately?
I think it depends what happens in the economy, because if inflation gets under control and prices begin to drop, I think that's going to help. If interest rates stabilize a little bit, that's going to help. I think one of the biggest challenges is with high interest rates. A lot of investors and developers are like, yeah, this is not penciling right now, so I'm not going to go forward with this project. And so far, that hasn't had a tremendous negative effect because there's other project opportunities in different sectors that my clients can take advantage of. But I think if things continue the way that they are, then that's going to be the biggest short-term hurdle is just the high price of building and the lack of incentive to build because of the interest rates.
Didn't we hit some of that coming out of COVID? The cost of materials skyrocketed because it was
but
rare.
I think because they were keeping down number one, they were pumping a bunch of money into the economy, and the government was, and also the interest rates were low, so projects still penciled. And so it was really interesting because I thought, COVID, end of the world, right? It's going to end construction, but it dipped for 3 months and then boom, it just took off again. One of the reasons being because construction got along with the strip clubs got the exemption from the government, and you could keep it open. But yeah, so I don't think COVID had that same impact. I think that the long-term situation, the situation we're in now, with the interest rates being where they're at, and people just getting used. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because the psychology of people is interesting. Because back in the 80s, I know you'll remember this. I remember this in the 80s. Interest rates were higher than they are now, and people just went about their business and built. But we're so used to having tremendously low interest rates that when they kick up to a certain point, where maybe the builders or the developers hang around waiting for the interest rates to go back down. So maybe if they stay consistently high for a period of time, people will just adjust and figure out, well, yeah, I'm just going to build it anyway, even if I'm not going to make exactly what I thought I would make with a lower interest rate.
I love that. Eric, I want to thank you so very, very much for taking the time and coming on here. This was exciting and fun for me because you educated me on your industry. But more importantly, you shined a light on when there's a problem. Let's break it down to the simplest solution. Let's get back to the absolute basics.
Yeah.
Because it's in the recruiting world, we complicate everything. We overthink it. We have solutions before we even know there's a problem. So we immediately go to a solution when we think we hit a hiccup. And your whole premise of talking to people, asking them questions, getting to their foundation so that they can get back to what made them what they were to begin with is profound. It really is. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.